Yes, friends, what is the config server? We're going to talk a little bit about that. To understand this better, it would be much more accurate to first identify the problem. Let's think about it like this. You have microservices running in a production environment. But over time, you need to change some configs. Or, because it's necessary, you need to change some configs over time. We don't know. So, for some reason, you want to change the configurations in your application YAML. This could be for different reasons. Maybe you're moving the database to a different location, or there are different connection points, communications between services, or let's say you're using RabbitMQ. You might stop using that and switch to API to Kafka, for example. So there could be many reasons, or maybe all of them are being used at the same time. I don't know. For whatever reason, you want to edit the configurations of your assets in the production environment. How would you do this? Of course, this can be done in many different ways, but if you look at how it should be done, using a config server for this process makes much more sense. Now look, what the config server here actually does is this. Normally, you have files called application.yml, friends. Here, you have your application YAML information as you can see. Here, let's say, for example, the address of the MongoDB. In fact, there are many parameters like the username, password, the name of the database, and ports. Let's say these need to be changed. How are you going to do this in a live environment? Now, to be able to do this, it would be much better if you were fed from a single point. In other words, all your services should be making requests to this. So, it would be the right approach for them to make a request to a server to get their own config information. So, this server, this config server, should send the application YAML information to those who request it. That way, when the user profile microservice or other related services start up or are already actively running, they can readily obtain their essential configuration information from the central config server and either properly initialize their operations or dynamically adjust their current configurations. Now, what will this provide you? It will give you a certain amount of flexibility. Because the application YAMLs inside the config server, let's say you have 50 or even 100 microservices. You need to change the YAML information inside all of them. Here's what you need to do to make this possible, friends. First, you go to the code and you fix the information. Then you need to create their images and redeploy them. This is really a hassle, redeploying the whole system just for a few changes. So what do you do instead? You set up a config server. If you change the application information inside the config server, the whole system changes accordingly. But there's still a shortcoming here. Here's why. To change the files inside the config server, you need to build the config server, create an image, and redeploy it. This is also a clunky method, so solving it this way isn't right either. So, how are we going to do it, sir? Here's what you're going to do, friends. You'll set up a GitHub integration. In other words, the config server will connect to GitHub. It will get the necessary information from GitHub and return whatever it needs. So, your application YAML files will be on GitHub, friends. Your config server will distribute the information it gets from GitHub. This way, if you want to change any configuration in your Kubernetes ecosystem, all you need to do is commit it to GitHub. There won't be any need for anything extra. It's a really great method, guys. I mean, it's a really good way to manage the system. And that's exactly what we'll be covering in this lesson, friends. Integrating the config server, but integrating it using GitHub. So basically, your config server will be integrated with GitHub. It will publish the information it gets from GitHub into the system. Friends, let's see how we're going to do this. Let's find out.